Okay, look. What happens today, I want to be clear, right? It's not because I'm filled with hatred or trying to do some horrible playthrough. Things happen sometimes, and as you know, we stick with our consequences. So don't get mad. Get interested as to how it happened, because I swear to you, on the bottom of my heart, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. Mostly. Let's start with the obvious. Okay, so Lazelle, Lazy, as I called her, I never liked that character from the moment she's introduced. She's very threatening towards me as a barbarian. Not particularly happy with that. And she made the mistake of waking me up with a knife to my throat and then taking me to the sides to kill me because of worms. And I didn't like that. But I did talk her down. I did relax. I was like, look, bit like Asterion. Don't hassle me. I won't hassle you. Stay over there. But you're definitely, like, on the kill list. If you push it any further, you're going to die. Thankfully, though, it wasn't my responsibility because I got a cutscene very shortly after with Shadowheart, also not happy with Lazy, and woke up to see Shadowheart leaning over Lazy with a knife to her throat. And honestly, I kind of was like, I like Shadowheart more. I don't particularly care for Lazy. So I'm just going to let Shadowheart do it. That was what I chose. I was like, Shadowheart, I just decided to watch. Let Shadowheart play it as she did. And she killed Lazy. So I didn't kill Lazy. But, you know, Shadowheart did. So she's gone. And the annoying thing is, yeah, I know the story things. I've got a second playthrough coming. But this is what I feel my character would have done. Is like, okay. Let you settle your differences. Is that, like... On the next playthrough, I will include Lazy in some way. But it actually, the annoying part is, her corpse won't go away. And every time I go back to the camp now, her corpse is just lying there on the floor. And I've tried picking it up. I've tried doing all sorts. I was like, can we have a funeral pyre? Can I throw it in the river? Can I do something? And every time I zone in here, fucking Lazy's corpse is just lying there. Like, staring at me with memories. And she didn't even have any good gear for me to take. So, anyway, she's gone. That's the next thing. And then I continued with my adventure into the Underdark. So, the Underdark turned out to be an entire zone that I had randomly discovered. I thought it was just like a temple that was beneath the troll camp. But it's not, underneath the goblins. I thought it was just a temple or something. But I've ended up spending a huge amount of time there and bumped into some dwarves. The dwarves were very aggressive, and they also mentioned that they're slavers, obviously an injustice. So I murdered them, and this turned into one of the harder fights I've done so far, which is where I learn more. I tend to not learn too much about game's mechanics if the game is pretty easy, until it starts throwing walls at me, and this is where I had to think about it, especially Counterspell. I can't figure out how Counterspell really works. Like, the tooltip says 18 meters. It seems to work through line of sight, because I line of sight them. I had Karlach as a wizard, and no matter where I put her, she kept getting counterspelled, and I tried to, like, move her really far away, give her some distance, but it didn't work out as well as I would like. But a great fight, really cool. Enjoyed this. This got me utilizing scrolls and things like that, and really tactically planning positioning. Very much reminded me of the latter stages of Divinity. So this was a very engaging fight, which I very much enjoyed. And then moved on to a mushroom village, which, by now, I will say, the audience was expecting me to murder everybody, and I'm not out to do that. And in fact, the mushroom people were really nice. Met a really nice mind flayer, actually, which is something that I tend to do in the games, is don't judge a book by its cover. I always compare it to Men in Black, where Will Smith is, like, doing his training, and the only person he kills is the little girl, because she's the only one who's suspect. Everybody else is, all the monsters, all the aliens, are doing things that are quite normal. They're not doing anything aggressive or intimidating, whereas the little girl is up to something. Don't judge a book by its cover. And the Mind Flayer, I was perfectly willing to talk to the Mind Flayer. And it's like, yeah, this guy's really cool. Amelium, something like that he's called, and gave me some quests to go and find a tower, which was really cool. So that gave me another opportunity, and my map started to fill out really nicely. I also found a boat by a shore, but I think that again takes us to another zone. So I'm going to do that later on, and decided to continue exploring the Underdark. I've got to find the Forge. I've got to find the Night Song. I've got to find so many things in the Underdark yet, even though I've gone all over the place in this trap-ridden hellhole, and freed dwarves from exploding areas and things like that. So I ventured to the tower. That was my next goal. This was, again, a series of puzzles. Getting past the turrets, I could stealth around them and destroy them with electricity, which was quite nice. And then ended up in the tower, and I could not figure out for the life of me how to get this thing working. There's clearly an elevator in there. And I keep finding these damn holes where I need to be small to get into them, which is super tricky because I don't have that ability. So I ended up venturing backwards and forwards and finding like little secrets and things and chests that might help me out. Eventually, I did manage to get the elevator working, and as soon as I went upstairs, there was these robots. One called Burnard. Burnard the robot. Burnard the robot clearly has no chill at all, and I don't know again if I'm underleveled or whatever, but Burnard, my only thing I said to him was like, hey, I'm here in peace, and he goes, oh yeah? Well, then engages with Burnard and a ton of robots that melted my party in like 3 hits. I gave this like 4 goes and just couldn't make headway on it at all, and it was coming to the end of my day, so I decided to chill. And then, but this is the situation. I know, and again, this is something that a lot of people struggle with how I play the game, is yeah, there's probably dialogue choices where I can make Bernard friendly and I don't have to deal with this fight, but that's not the path we chose. I tried that by saying we come in peace, but we've ended up in combat, therefore Bernard must die. Right, that is what happened. So I went to bed that night, and all night, and this game has infected me so much that I was laying in bed like, what am I going to do there? How am I going to deal with this? I was like, okay, robots are weak to electricity. He's got this huge thunder AoE, so maybe thunder resistance, so we're not as damaged by that. My barbarian is really good at wiping out small adds very, very quickly, starting to develop into that character that can have really good movement, can one-hit a lot of enemies and maybe circle the room. I could use Asterion up on a ledge to start the fight, and then when he gets crowded by robots, I can Misty Step over to another side, so I'm kind of kiting those backwards and forwards. And then it struck me as well as I hadn't yet used my Ogre Horn, which can call the ogres in. I was always saving it for the biggest, baddest fight, and this kind of felt like the situation for that. So the very next morning, I went in and I sharpened my weapons. I have bags of consumables now that I haven't used because I am a hoarder. I'm not going to use consumables until I feel they're necessary. This is one of those moments. And then I really thought about my positioning and stuff, and then summoned in the ogres. The ogres were clearly the defining factor rather than my gameplay here. They soaked up so much damage from all of the adds, because there's like, what, 7 or 8 adds in this fight? And they're constantly using these bows that just destroy my characters so hard. So they soaked up tons and tons of damage and made it really useful in order to continue the fight. And eventually I managed to wipe out all the adds with my barb, and then was left with just Bernard, which obviously he had no chance by that point with all 4 characters beating down on him. I managed to bring down Bernard, which was great. That was really cool. I felt very satisfied about this fight. These kind of fights are what I live for in these games. It's like, okay, now we've got something meaty and I have to really think about it tactically and not just steamroll my way through it. So using all these materials felt good. And then surprisingly, the ogres agreed to come back and help me out, like if I paid them money. And considering the difference they'd made in that side of the battle, 100%. I paid them, I think it was like 500 gold. I was like, I'll absolutely do that. That's no problem. Continuing on then, I ventured into different areas and found a lot of materials and found some areas that I wasn't sure what to do with, which meant it was probably time to go on the boat. Okay, like, this goes bad, but it's really not my fault, man. It's really not my fault, and it's now nicknamed as the Massacre at Grymforge. Or the Grymforge Massacre, whatever you want to call it. It's the Grymforge Massacre. I headed to the Grymforge, I talk my way in, and clearly they've got a lot of slaves, a lot of abused gnomes. There's big bosses in there, and I'm exploring around. There's a lot of architectural history with the Justiciars, which makes me really interested in Shadowheart, because I think Shadowheart's religion at some point is going to fall apart. It's too embedded in her character to not fall apart at some point, and I don't know which direction it's going to go. She's very, very faith-ridden. I hope she doesn't just become broken, which I don't think they'll do. Maybe switch faith, or she'll move to a happier style of appreciating religion. But she's so clouded by it with the pain in her hand and all that kind of stuff. So this story's starting to develop now. I learned there was another area above Grymforge, which has some curse in it, that needs a moon lantern. And I have a broken moon lantern, but I don't know how I fix it. But moving around, I entered into what is clearly the battle arena. It has loads of enemies in it, and it's next to a big lava pit. I got into the dialogue, and the fight started. This is, again, another massive fight, clearly. And as soon as they started the fight, it very quickly dawned on me that I'm really close to lava, and they're probably going to shove me. And as this was, like, running through my brain, I got thrown into the lava and melted. Immediately. And then I thought, probably, like, on the next go-round, I can throw them in the lava, but will I be able to get the loot? well, my goal, of course, was to save the gnomes. That was the primary goal, and to access the drow that's on the other side of the wall there. So it began. I'm not proud of what happens here. I really considered my positioning here. I got a steering up on the ledge, ready to shove off a bow and arrow gnome and was up there. I had my barbarian and Shadowheart down in the arena itself, but pushed near a wall so they couldn't get shoved immediately. I had Karlach up on the ledge as well, so she could bombard spells down into the arena. And it made sense, based on what I told you earlier, to bring the ogres in, because there's a lot of enemies down here, and there's again another 8 or 9 enemies, and having them just soak up damage. I don't care about their DPS, but them soaking up damage is a good idea. So I start the fight, and things are looking pretty good. The gnomes are helping me, which is great. Again, they're soaking up some damage, and they're doing some DPS, and blah, blah, blah. And then, at some point, and I want to point out that you guys might notice this very quickly in the video, is that the gnomes kind of went rogue. Started attacking me, as well as everything else. And I killed everybody. Took me about 25 minutes, but I butchered them all. We're all dead. Gnomes, the slaves, the dwarves, the leader. You know, it got so bad that during the fight, and again, it was a long fight, I was very concerned about avoiding knocking the main boss into the lava to make sure I got his loot. And then at some point, one of the gnomes did it for me and threw him in the lava, which at that point I was like, we might have to reset this. If I literally can't loot the boss as badly as this has gone, which was horrific, we might have to reload it if we don't even get the loot. Like, there are limits to what I will not reload for at this point, because very clearly something had gone wrong. And I hadn't hit any of the gnomes. I want to be clear. I hadn't attacked any of the gnomes. I had learned somewhat my lesson. And as it turned out, and some of you may have noticed this, what actually happened is I spawned the ogres in. And one of the ogres has an attack that's like a frontal slam. And that hit one of the gnomes, turning the gnomes hostile to me and everybody else. And it turned into just an absolute bloodbath. Where, I'll be honest, very few people were attacking me. They were so engaged with killing each other that I was kind of good to just keep murdering everybody. And I did. And I did that. And everybody's dead now. And apparently, the game doesn't expect this to happen, because it then got a little buggy. Because the ogres bugged out. And when I was, and wouldn't talk to me after the fight, they were just stood in the arena, the 2 ogres that remained. And as I did manage to loot the boss, which meant we're sticking with this situation, it is what happened. There's no reason for me to really reload, other than, like, I want a clean fight, which is not the way we play. They then accused me of stealing their loot and aggroed on me to kill me, but also wouldn't move and wouldn't attack. They just gave me dialogue that they now hate me and are about to kill me, and nothing was happening. And it got very strange. I did some exploring, because I found there was an area I needed to get to, which I did eventually do. But as I reloaded the zone, the ogres were then friendly again. And just like, yeah, we'll come back and fight for you. It's so confusing. It's so weird. But the whole thing was crazy. But not to be a bad scenario, make good of a bad situation, is on return to the Mushroom People, following all this, they called me the Peacebringer. As I was drenched in the blood of the friendlies. The enemies alike, I was dubbed the Peacebringer. So, stick that up your ass. Following all this, it was time to actually do probably the Act 1 quest of the start of the game, which was to kill the goblins, which I did. I returned upstairs to the goblin camp eventually after completing the Underdark as much as humanly possible. Where, again, it was another bloodbath. But again, these were baddies, so it's not the end of the world, as I murdered all the goblin leaders. And did manage to rescue Halsin. It was my first time playing with a druid in the game. Didn't like it. Animations, though, on point. Animating a bear climbing a ladder and jumping around looks hilarious. It does. I might give this a... This will be definitely a second playthrough thing. It's not something I want to mess with now. My party feels pretty rock solid, honestly. I want to modify them individually. Like, I'm not happy with Asterion as a ranger. It's not paying off for me as I would like. Shadowheart can be a little confusing on turns as to, like, how effectively to use her, but she's gaining more spells. And Karlach is starting to get good as a wizard. Certainly some good spells are starting to appear. So the party is kind of coming together. I absolutely adore my barbarian, which was great. But murdering all the goblins and releasing Halsin was the culmination of the next series of gameplay there. And it was really fun. It's unfortunate, though, that we're so short into... We're still in Act 1. And I do understand there's a lot of blood flowing through the rivers and seeping into the soil of the Sword Coast, and it's a combination of bad people and good people, and it's a lot at my hands. But I swear to you, and I think you can see the evidence here, it's never my intention. I always try and do things right, but I also posit to some people, who, especially if you are somebody who does save and reload if things aren't going in your favor, like the dialogue's not as you want it, you know, you'll reload and do it again. There is something really joyful and fun about the experience that is created if you deal with your consequences, even if you have the best intention. And I recommend at least one playthrough like that, where even if you already like know how to get around everything. I know for some of you, you'd have to intentionally scuff it, but if you have gameplay that just goes wrong, like it did for me in Grymforge, it's like, this is just not what I want to happen. I need to reload, because obviously I don't want to kill the gnomes. If you just let it play out, the weird and wonderful things that happen, such as going from being a butcher to the Peacebringer in a space of a few minutes, is really enjoyable. So we'll be back to... My next goal is to finish up everything in the upstairs and the spider and things like that. So thank you so much for watching. And yeah, I'll see you again. Bye, everybody.